Welcome to Generation Digital Workforce, the podcast that's here to explore the role of robotic process automation and other digital technologies. Whether you're just getting started or you're looking for advanced strategies and tactics, if you're curious about where human and digital workers are coming together to transform the future of work, then this podcast is for you. All right, let's get into the show.
Hello, everyone. I'm Brad Hairston with Prism. Today on the Generation Digital Workforce podcast, my guest is Jim Shand, a director in the automation practice of the global advisory AlixPartners. I will be talking with Jim about how the current pandemic will likely drive changes in the way work gets done, as well as the overall need for automation. Jim, thanks for joining me today.
Brad, thanks for having me. So let me tell you a bit about AlixPartners first of all. AlixPartners is a global advisory firm. It's been around for about 40 years, with a premier firm in the restructuring and bankruptcy industry. We also take all of our skills and knowledge that we've built up over the last 40 years and apply those to healthy companies as well, with the goal of driving them to better financial and operational performance. So with that as a bit of background, hopefully you can understand that helping companies reduce cost is often part of what we do for our clients. Not the only thing, but often part of what we do for our clients. And so we look at every opportunity we can, every lever, every possibility to help our clients do just this. And this is where the digital workforce comes in. So, traditionally, when it comes to looking at reducing the cost of labor, opportunities such as, reducing the workforce, offshoring, outsourcing, process improvement work. Those are the traditional levers that we bring to bear to reduce cost. But the rise of the digital workforce over the last few years provides us with additional levers now for companies to reduce their cost of labor. But this is important for other reasons as well. In the environment where a company is required to cut costs and has to look at reducing its cost of labor, the digital workforce can actually provide new opportunities and new career paths for employees. So while it's likely that any cost reduction scenario, some labor costs will be shared, companies don't need to rely on outsourcing companies to implement their digital workforce. They can, in many situations, own the digital workforce themselves and provide new career paths, new opportunities, new skill sets for their own employees.
Jim, thank you for that background. That's really helpful. So certainly the coronavirus is the most disruptive global event anyone in our generation has experienced to date. How is it driving businesses, regardless of industry or shape and size, to rethink how work gets done going forward?
So, like most people, over the last few weeks, I've been working from home, and I've had the chance to speak to a number of companies in the digital workforce industry. So, companies such as Prism, but also a number of implementation companies as well. And I've heard now what's become a pretty consistent story several times. After a lull in communications with clients and prospects in the first couple of weeks, a lot of the implementation companies have been receiving calls both from existing customers and prospects that are leading them to think that, that maybe this event is going to be a bit of an inflection point for the adoption of digital workforce technologies. So companies are realizing that shared services operations, both at home and overseas, are presenting a real operational risk. It's already being extensively reported in the press, for example, that BPO companies in India have been pretty hard hit by the virus, unfortunately. In addition to that, the workers who are working in these BPO shared service centers are not so easily able to work from home, and the work itself doesn't always easily lend itself to being able to be done from home. So there's a few themes that have arisen from the companies I've spoken to about the whole digital workforce and the adoption of this technology. So first of all, for companies that have shared services operations who already have an automation program, they're looking to go faster, to go harder, to automate more work and to automate it more quickly. Secondly, the companies, again, that I've spoken to have been receiving a lot of interest for companies who don't yet have a digital workforce program in place. And they're seeing the digital workforce as much as a risk mitigation type of initiative as much as a cost reduction initiative. In fact, that may be even more important now. There's an even stronger wish now as well to bring work perhaps that's being done offshore, to bring it back onshore again, both from a cost reduction play, but as well as a risk mitigation play. So, in summary, there's lots of good reasons why the digital workforce may see a growth in the coming weeks, months, and years, unfortunately driven by the current pandemic situation.
Yeah, those are some great observations, Jim. So, at Blue Prism, we like to refer to the digital workforce as the future of work. It sounds like, in your opinion, the future may be here. Is that fair?
Well, Brad, I think for some industries, the ones that have been extensively written about already, financial services, for example, the future's been here for a while, for sure. Also the largest companies, from what I know from the companies I've spoken to as well, large companies in most industries where scale makes the digital workforce make a lot of sense. Again, the digital workforce has been around already for quite a while. But you've got to look at this question functionally as well. So, I assume that by now pretty much every IT department is aware of this technology. So are probably most leaders in finance, given that this is where digital workforce initiatives usually start. However, if you're not deeply involved in the digital workforce industry, or you're not part of IT, or you're not in finance, it might be surprising to you that perhaps there are many companies still and many executives who are still unaware of digital workforce technology. They've never heard of RPA. They've never heard of intelligent automation. They've never heard of the digital workforce. So, for example, retail, which is one of the kind of core industries that AlixPartners serves, I'd actually wager with you that a lot of executives outside of the largest companies are still not there just yet, maybe kind of relatively unaware of this technology. I think it's just a matter of time, and the current crisis may well make them more aware of this technology. But I think it's still true to say that there are still industries and functions within companies that are not as aware of the future work as others.
I think you're right on the money there with regard to retail. I'm seeing the same thing in the market. I think oil and gas is another one that's kind of lagged behind a bit. But I think we're starting to see a little bit of momentum there, and that should continue. So Jim, where do you expect most companies that begin a digital transformation, based on the digital workforce to begin? Could you elaborate on that?
Yeah, sure. So, an easy and obvious answer is in the back office, specifically in finance. To my knowledge, most digital workforce initiatives seem to start there, and for some pretty good reasons as well. There's good, standardized, repetitive processes, relatively less risk if you get, if you go through to implementation. And of course, being in the back office, it's not exposed to anything customer facing. However, the question you asked is where companies will begin the transformation, not where will RPA be implemented. And I think that's a slightly different conversation. So the back office is a good place to start and a good place to test the technology. I think to be really transformational, digital labor will need to move out of the back office into supply chain, customer service, operations. These are all highly industry dependent, of course, but I think that's where you get real transformation happening. So to be really considered a transformation, digital labor must be viewed as just that, something that can either help or replace human labor, not just simply a technology that can automate a process here and there.
Okay, so moving forward, what are some of the fundamental things that you would advise a company to address as they begin this journey? Can you kind of go into that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So look, a lot of companies have introduced digital labor in the sense that they may have one or two bots functioning here and there doing one or two tasks. So at least to me, the most fundamental thing is taking something that's been introduced and then taking that to scale. Otherwise, it remains just another technology, which of course none of us want. So to me, this is a bit like the early days of offshorings, where companies would try out an offshore resource or two to see how they got on, but then they were able to scale. And I think that digital labor is still today less flexible than human labor, so it'll take longer to scale. And the more intelligent the bots become, the quicker it will be possible to grow the digital workforce. But that's the most fundamental thing, is kind of taking an introduced technology and really taking it to scale. So, beyond just increasing the scale of the digital workforce, there's a number of fundamental things that must be addressed, such as making sure you've got the right operating model for both digital and human labour, making sure that you go beyond a vision and that, benefits and alignment to corporate strategy actually happen and are taken down to a very kind of tactical operational level. Looking at organizational design, that means looking at digital workforce not just as a automation project or something tactical to go change a particular process, but looking at how you're going to have human labor and digital labor working alongside each other. Governance and pipeline, making sure you are prioritizing the right automations in the right sequence that makes sense from an operation and organizational and a customer point of view. Making sure you've got the right delivery methodology, the right service model, the right roles and responsibilities in place in your automation organization, the right technical architecture, of course. And, the last thing, I think this is maybe driven a bit by the kind of current pandemic situation is looking at cybersecurity. So what you probably don't want to do is, swap the coronavirus for a cybersecurity threat. So as important as cybersecurity is today, if automation is going to grow, if the digital workforce is going to scale, then cybersecurity probably becomes orders of magnitude more important than it even is today.
Yeah. I think one way you could sum up a lot of those things you talked about is kind of putting that under an operating model umbrella. It sounds like you're really talking about companies needing to not just make a minor change here and there, but they need a new operating model that involves human labor and digital labor working together. Is that fair?
I think that's very fair, yeah.
Okay. So, Jim, when should companies begin this process? I mean, do they have to wait until the pandemic is over and we've all gone back to business as usual, if there ever is going to be business as usual again?
Well, look, clearly companies have got other pressing priorities right now today, around the safety and security of their human workforce. So looks like to me, at least, that getting back to normal is going to be some kind of slower ramp up. However, I do think, and I've heard, and based on those conversations I've had over the last few weeks, that there are companies that today are already starting to think ahead. Companies who are implementing digital workforce solutions are receiving calls from customers and prospects, as I mentioned earlier. So companies are starting to think beyond the pandemic clearly. For any company that's starting to think about this now, some questions they might start asking themselves are things like, do I have operations like call centers, shared service centers, something that might be an operational risk to my company in the future? That might be a driver of at least wanting to start to think about this now. Secondly, is my company already looking at digital workers? I would wager there's a lot of executives who aren't aware of what's going on in the depths of the IT organization and may not know that there's already some experimentation going on. So go talk with your IT department, find out what's going on, see if you already have a starter project in place to look at a digital workforce. If you've at least experimented with it, try to find out what's happened so far, see what the future plans are. So make sure you get some learnings. Now, I'm really kind of pointing this comment at senior executives. I don't think there's any executive today who, if you ask them the question, have you heard of the World Wide Web, would say, no, I've never heard of that. And I would wager that a couple of years from now, that's going to be exactly the same cases with the digital workforce. So please take time to learn about it, because this is not just a strategy to help you reduce costs, but it's a strategy to maybe help reduce some operational risks that your company is facing today.
Excellent. Well, Jim, we've come to the end of our podcast. I just want to thank you for your time and your input. I think you've given everyone some really good food for thought, and I wish you well. Thanks again.
Brad, thank you very much.
You've been listening to Generation Digital Workforce. If you want to hear more about RPA, AI, and other cognitive technologies that are shaping the future of work, join us next time as we continue to go deeper on these topics with industry innovators and experts. To make sure you never miss a future episode, subscribe to the show in your favorite podcast player. And if you've liked what you heard today, please leave us a review. It's one of the best ways to help more people find valuable content. For show notes and more info, visit us at blueprism.com/podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.